This is Out of Bounds. This is Out of Bounds, your weekly spot for the wild, weird, and wacky in the sports world. That's me, O'Brien. I'm John Alba. You're waving side to side. You good?
I am. I'm trying to make sure that the allergies aren't getting to me too much, but as we'll see with our opening toast tonight, I'm taking plenty of preventative steps. We are ready to go. Take that, pollen.
But I feel like there's very minimal seasonal change where you are.
No. Ooh, no. I would say it's pollen year round. But no, I would say that between March and May is where we get the bulk of our pollen. And while we're not in the midst of the green everywhere season here in Florida. Evidently, we got some sort of ragweed or something because I popped up with it this morning. And so, I've been very fortunate, John, because ever since my tonsillectomy, I haven't had any allergies. Like everybody else was in pain through the month of April down here. I was chilling. And so, just finally got to me. I bragged too much at Jags rookie camp last week, I guess.
What goes around comes around. We welcome you all to another edition of Out of Bounds here on Know Your News. And again, folks, if you are watching us live, hit us with your super chats. We appreciate all chats, but especially super chats. You can do that by commenting on YouTube, of course, and just get your chat right in there if you're watching there, or you go to kynchat.com, you leave us a chat and we'll read it on air as well. I know accessibility wise, YouTube is often the easiest for those of you who are tuning in. Anything new this week for you, Mia? I know we are in post-draft season, and I don't know. I feel like the summertime, it's kind of that weird time where we're
It is
right on
the
verge.
lame duck week. Like this is the lame duck week. Yeah. We get OTAs starting next week. So that at least we'll finally see NFL players on the field, which will be nice. And then obviously the NBA conference finals and the Stanley Cup conference finals, which we're going to dive into here on Out of Bounds tonight. But it's that weird, like in between, like Lakers and Nuggets isn't until Tuesday. So outside of baseball, like we're kind of just hanging out. So between that and then got the interns starting the last 2 weeks. And so a lot of onboarding, John. You and I did a lot of internships growing up. I never thought I'd see the day that I myself had to coordinate the interns.
Yep.
In my best efforts to create a meaningful experience like the ones that we were lucky enough to have, I'm realizing how much work it is to like get all this set up. And yeah, you got to let them fly and do their thing. But also I'm like, my God, I spent half my day coordinating.
Got to corral them too. Well, one way that we're going to corral you here on Out of Bounds is by hitting you with our opening toast.
Which I do appreciate all of our friends on YouTube who want sweet tea, but I'm not going to go in the sweet tea direction. I'm actually going in the OJ direction so that I'm prepared for fighting whatever pollen or whatever it is that got into my throat.
See, I'll homage to the South with a little old Smoky here with a little ASMR first, pop an A, and to the down week, I guess.
The off week, the weird middle, the let's call it the cream and the Oreo sandwich. That is the month of May. Sandwiched in between OTA's Memorial Day weekend, Kentucky Derby. It's the nice little, hey, take a deep breath. Summer's almost here.
When I was in Nashville a few weeks ago, I saw in the airport an Old Smoky brand that was mango habanero whiskey.
Ooh.
And I have no idea how that would taste. I love mango habanero, but I had no idea how that would taste. I know this went down real easy tonight. You could even say that when I'm selecting my whiskey, Mia, that it's a process, but it's not the process. I have one question for you here. Let me tee it up. Philadelphia 76ers suffered a brutal 112-88 loss yesterday to the Boston Celtics. Celtics are headed to the conference finals once again. They got the Miami Heat. More on that in just a minute. Philly got outscored 33-10 in the third quarter with the association's most valuable player, Joel Embiid, and James Harden combining for 24 total points in this game. Harden, rumored to be interested in greener pastures, perhaps a return to Houston, maybe even Phoenix being thrown out there. Things not looking great, Mia. So my lone question, do you trust the process?
I don't. And it was always a gamble to begin with. I mean, when you consider that all three of the pillars of the process in Philadelphia were all coming off significant injuries in college. None of them have played a full season in college between Joel Embiid, Markelle Fultz, and Ben Simmons. But they went ahead and did it anyway. And they said it's going to take a couple of years to get them all healthy, all playing together. And then it never quite happened. So then they tried to tinker with it. They got Jimmy Butler in there for a little bit. Ben Simmons could shoot back then. And then Ben Simmons couldn't shoot. They let Jimmy Butler go. We're going to Band-Aid this with James Harden. But as Joel Embiid said last night, John, he and James Harden cannot do it all alone. And while if I'm Tobias Harris or Tyrese Maxey, a guy that the 76ers drafted, I'd feel a little bit slighted. Now, I think part of why Maxey's role is the way it is because of Doc Rivers and the way that he operates. I think he favors, the veterans. Like, he wants to coach. He's not going to be developing. He's not going to be, hey, let's get all together and sing Kumbaya. I love Phil Jackson. That's just not Doc. He's out playing golf most of the time. And so I think you're seeing the fruits of that. What I am curious about, and I'm realizing now as I say this in real time, John, we never even touched on this on my daily program on 1010XL. Monty Williams fired by the Phoenix Suns. I was outraged. I mean, even more than Budenholzer, because when he was let go in Milwaukee 2 weeks ago, at least you're like, all right, like, you can't allow what happened between the Bucks and the Heat to happen when you have Giannis Antetokounmpo on your team and you won a world title 2 years ago. But Monty Williams, I mean, yes, he hasn't won a title, so Matt Ishbia can argue that he hasn't gotten Phoenix over the hump. But in reality, you and I both know he was let go yesterday because Kevin Durant's friend is going to be hired as the head coach of the Phoenix Suns. So that is where I look at the Philadelphia 76ers, and that may be the only route they have left, because other than that, what other road is left to travel on this process?
No. So on the Suns front, look what, and I like Kevin Durant a lot. I've always been a big Kevin Durant fan. But look at the change that happened in Brooklyn, where essentially he forced Kenny Atkinson out there, and then they brought in Steve Nash. That didn't work out. Set them back to where they are right now. Same thing going on in Phoenix. I think the rumor of James Harden wanting to go to Phoenix to reunite with Kevin Durant is just laughable. Yeah, I mean, it is truly laughable. And I imagine Aiden will not be there in Phoenix. But on this Philadelphia front, I'll post two things. Number one, I think deep down, this is just Doc Rivers' way of secretly getting himself back to the Orlando Magic 20 plus years later.
So that he's prepared for Bronny James in 2 years. Your bold prediction from a week ago.
Because the Magic have trusted the process, and now the Magic are starting to knock, and people are like, "Oh, there might be some foundation here." I'm just kidding. That's not going to happen. The thing that stands out to me most about the process, Mia, is that the biggest failure in the process was that it fostered and welcomed a culture of losing, and that is the biggest problem with the process. There's no issue necessarily with being patient in a rebuild, but we are 9 years into this thing. And I understand the same people at the top aren't necessarily there anymore, but you can no longer buy into that moniker. We are now at the point where the 76ers should have won a championship, and they didn't. You might have even argued that they should have won a few championships by now, and they haven't.
We will give them the Kawhi buzzer beater. That was
probably their best chance. That was probably their best chance.
That was wonky. I'll give them that.
But they still lost 4 games in that series. It wasn't just one game they lost in that thing, right? At the end of the day, I think that the whole trust the process thing does mediate and enable this culture of losing. And it's not to say that the Sixers have lost a lot, because they are a successful regular season franchise. But at the end of the day, you are judged by how many championships you win. And they have won 0. And Joel Embiid is an all-time great player. He is. He's a fantastic NBA big man. But he will be defined by that. And I do want to say real quick, too, to your point that you said about his press conference, the quote sounds really bad out of context. In context, it's not as bad. He was asked about Harden potentially being gone. And he said, hey, look, whether it's just me, it can't be all on me. Whether it's just me and James, it can't be on us. It has to be on all of us. So in context, it doesn't sound quite as bad. Out of context, it sounds horrible, and you need to always be conscious of that as a player.
Right. Two things, because yes, the Twitter trolls, they love to run with those things. Number one, as you said all this, what spoke to me was they got away from the process when they stopped developing players. And while I hinted at Doc Rivers not being necessarily the developer of young talent, he obviously would rather coach guys that are established or on the cusp of being established. I think that this stems further back. I think this is when they said, all right, Ben Simmons stinks. We're just going to bring in James Harden and a Band-Aid fix. And I think inherently that is when the process truly ended. As outside of Tyrese Maxey, what player have they really developed, so to speak, in the last 5 years of the process? None. And they shipped Markelle Fultz out of town, and here we are. So that's number one. Number two, I'm going to pose this question to you, and I'm really excited to see which way you take it, because we talked about this on Primetime today. Give me another player. Hypothetical. Let's do close to home. Trevor Lawrence. Quarterback of a team that is perennially bad.
You had to get that one in, didn't we?
Well, right. No, but because it's a good example. I could give you another example too, but it makes more sense here. A quarterback of a team that is perennially at the bottom of the cellar dwellers. If he wins an MVP in the next few years and the Jags are getting 10, 11 wins a year, but they never actually make the conference title game or the Super Bowl, would people be content in Jacksonville with that? Because you can make the comparison that because Philly was so bad for so long, they were just content with having a competitor.
Philadelphia fan base is not comparable to the Jacksonville fan base. And
no, not at all. But the notion remains.
But I think that is an element in this story that we're telling here, is that Philadelphia sports fans have extremely high expectations year in and year out. And what I think has been worse for Philly fans recently, Mia, has been all their teams have been good enough to get close, but not been able to actually win.
Hey, the Eagles did.
The Eagles did in 2018. In 2018, they did, which was 5 years ago now. And I understand, like, that's great for them after their long layoff. But in a society where it's what have you done for me lately, that 5 years ago is an eternity ago. And that's the only team that was able to actually break through here. So I think that the problem with that process is, like you said, you fail to develop, and you could say, oh, well, they've moved past it, but then they're leaning on it and leaning well back. Giannis, we heard his quote where he said, like, oh, you know,
what is failure?
What is failure? Right. Embiid tried to say the same exact thing, but here's the difference. Giannis won a title a couple of years ago. Joel Embiid didn't. So
Flags fly forever.
So if you didn't win that championship, you don't reserve the right to be like, well, you know, here we are in year 9 of this, and well, I'm not going to call it a failure because it's just part of that process. No, the process is dead. The process is done. It's over with, and this is a failure. And now the 76ers upper brass has to determine, do we move forward and try one more time with the majority of this group that we have, or do we try to redesign, rebuild, and reclaim?
You mentioned 5 years ago feeling like an eternity ago. You know what also feels like an eternity ago? The NBA bubble. A lot of people gave the bubble crap. They called it a Mickey Mouse tournament. They said that the Lakers weren't true champions. However, the conference finals this year are the Denver Nuggets and the Los Angeles Lakers in the West, the Boston Celtics, and Miami Heat in the East. The same as the bubble 3 years ago. John, is this a coincidence? Or was the bubble onto something, and these 4 teams have been 4 of the perennial contenders over the last 5 years?
Well, there's been a lot of adjustments made for each of these teams in their own right. I have to give a lot of credit to... I'll give first off, I'll go individually here. The Miami Heat. I mean, Eric Spoelstra is one of the greatest coaches of all time. He has earned that distinction where he
7 of the last 13 Eastern Conference Finals. That's the biggest stat no one's talking about in the NBA.
I mean, truly, and this is Pat Riley's successor, and he has marked out. And I feel like he's done it very quietly too.
No one talks about it. No one.
Right. So I give him a lot of credit there.
I mean, not to go on a side tangent, but like, how many coaches have coached the Lakers since LeBron got there?
A lot
in 2020.
How many have coached them since the Lakers won a championship in 2020. There's been several. So, yeah, I think that the consistency is super admirable. The Lakers started this year 2-10, okay? And they were able to retool. So we're not even talking about the same team that won a championship a few years ago. The Nuggets have been one of those teams that have kind of rolled with the punches and added as necessary. And I appreciate those efforts. And it feels like they're so close. They've always been so close the past few years. And then the Celtics, I mean, they've got that core that has just been so rock solid. So, the bubble experience itself, I think, was at the time one of the most impressive things that we've ever seen in sports for these teams to come back at a high level. I know that there's a lot of people who are like, well, it happened, no pun intended here, in a bubble. It happened in a small sample size, but I could not disagree anymore, because to be in full season mode, marching towards the postseason, then having to shut your body down for months and gear right back up for playoff level basketball, I think that prepared these teams and these players for longevity more than we'll ever give credit for, Mia.
Yes, I couldn't agree with all of that more. I think, though, that two of those teams you alluded to, because we're always going to talk about the Lakers and the Celtics. Unfortunately, it's kind of like the Cowboys in the National Football League. Even when they're not competitive, they're going to be talked about simply because of the name brand recognition and the previous titles, which is funny because the Miami Heat have won how many NBA championships in the 21st century? Yet, as we talked about, no one talks about Eric Spoelstra. No one wants to talk about Jimmy Butler outside of his coffee company. And whenever he, pops off and drops 50 in a playoff game, and all of a sudden we go, oh, that's right, Miami and Jimmy, they're here. They've been consistently one of the bigger contenders in the NBA playoffs the last 3 to 4 years since he got down there. And even before he got there, in the lull, when it was Kyle Lowry and some other cast of characters, obviously Tyler Hero was a huge asset to them. You go back to when it was just the Bam show, when it was Bam Adebayo trying to run things down there. Eric Spoelstra is a lot like a Bill Belichick or a Mike Vrabel, where he may not win pretty, but he's going to find a way to win a few. And so I think, if anything, this gives flowers and credence to Miami that they are a contender. And moreover, I think it does prove that Denver was not a blip on the radar in the bubble. I think those are the two teams that people question. And now I understand Nikola Jokic is the MVP, especially after everything we just said about Embiid.
You need a superstar, right? You need
Correct.
A superstar. That's
but
it.
People always, even though the Nuggets were the 1 seed in the West, people still they sleep on the Nuggets. Because once Jamal Murray went down with the torn ACL a couple seasons ago, everyone forgot that they had that incredible run in the bubble. Everyone forgets about that 7-game series against the Utah Jazz, which is arguably one of the best series we've seen in NBA playoffs history of late. And so I think, if anything, I am hoping and praying the Nuggets are competitive, because I know the Heat will be. I'm not worried with Jimmy and with Eric Spoelstra, but I'm hoping and praying that they can be competitive, because I think it will prove that, yes, they actually built a contender in Denver. That was not the process gone wrong.
Now, if it goes the other way and LeBron carries these retooled Lakers back to the promised land again.
Will it be over the Celtics, though?
Well, I'm saying just getting.
People are just going to, because then it's going to be, it's showtime.
Just getting them there in the first place. But it'd be pretty crazy if he beat his old team too in the finals. I mean, that's a storyline
for a second time in 4 seasons.
Right? So I'm very excited about these 2 conference finals, because I think there are a multitude of storylines that we can whore out here on this show for weeks to come that we can get out of these series. Number 1, that's how I'm thinking. But number 2, I think they will deliver quality action. But I could also see, and I hope I'm wrong, I really do, I could see the Nuggets smoking the Lakers. And I hope I'm wrong on that.
How would you feel, and we're going to talk about the Stanley Cup playoffs in a little bit, how would you feel about a Denver-Miami title game?
I mean, is it the most...
Is that good for the NBA?
Is it the most blockbuster? No, but in terms of quality of play, it might be our best option. So
the hottest team versus the best team all year.
And you got to give a lot of credit to Jason Tatum. Took so much flack in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference semis, and he comes out and has an all-time great playoff game when it mattered most, 51 points. Again, I think we've talked about Jason Tatum before on the show. where it's like he's kind of right outside that Mount Rushmore of current NBA players. He's knocking on it. Performances like that, you throw up another one of those in these playoffs, you're immortal for life. As far
in the
as
same vein, Jamal Murray put up a couple of those performances, and it seems like outside of the niche NBA fan, people have forgotten. And granted, part of that was because he missed so much time with the leg injury, but that's where I look at Jason Tatum, and you got to put a couple together. Because look at Devin Booker. Devin Booker has put up epic performances in the regular and postseason, and I think people forget that he probably is a top 5 player right now because his team hasn't performed when it mattered most.
You bring up those Suns. Oh, I just don't know, because I've watched the Nets for a very long time, and I've seen the Nets now twice go all in to win it all and come up short, and the Suns are dangerously close
to the sun
in that,
flying towards the sun.
And what's sad is a couple of years ago when they lost to the Bucks, that was the team that was really developed and put together and put properly in that position, only for it to fall apart. Man, just so tough. But there are just some powerhouses in the NBA, like the Golden State Warriors. Look at that picture right there. Those are winners, right, Mia?
4 players for 4 championships.
Well, we know LeBron did away with the Golden State Warriors this season. There's been a lot of chatter that this could be the end of the Warriors dynasty as we know it. There are a lot of questions surrounding how they're going to actually return the core of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. There's some contract discussions that need to be had. Andre Iguodala just retired. Tremendous career, by the way. If I could give an additional toast to Andre Iguodala. There's a lot of people who are trying to make the case he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he is, but we're going to have another Hall of Fame discussion on this show. He's a Hall of Excellent, but not quite Hall of Fame level. But is this the end? Have we seen the end of the Golden State Warriors as the powerhouse? And will we get more passive-aggressive celebrations from Steph Curry for years to come?
I don't want to believe it's over, but I do.
Why do you think so?
Because even Steph, when he was dropping 30 in this series against the Lakers, by the end, if they weren't winning it, he was gassed. And you could tell. He looked gassed. Klay Thompson is basically playing on one leg. Draymond Green performed at a very high level in this series, and I think he still has some years left in the tank. I think all 3 of them do.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at their supporting cast, and I look at on the picks that they missed. James Wiseman, the number 2 overall pick.
Out.
That would have been critical. If you got a LaMelo Ball,
yep.
I understand he's had his issues in Charlotte, but if you had gotten a LaMelo Ball, you have your hand-picked successor who you slide right in. If right now, if you don't give Jordan Poole the contract you did because he underperformed, maybe you go out and you get not a Kevin Durant because he was already there, but like you go out and you get another superstar. You don't have a guy who scores 0 points in 12 minutes playing on a max contract.
They traded off D'Angelo Russell, who was amazing for the Lakers in this stretch that has helped them get to where they need to be.
Bingo. And so I think that it's not so much the Warriors are cooked because their current, their nucleus is old. It's that they never actually fortified the nucleus around them to prepare for the tail end of their career. That's why LeBron is in the Western Conference Finals right now, because when they retooled that Lakers roster at the trade deadline, they went out and they got young cats who maybe didn't succeed with the team that they were drafted in, whether it was Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, all guys that it didn't work out at the first stop, but they were hungry to prove that they could play at the highest level. And in doing so, you have a team that outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis, I think the average age is like 23 or 24.
It's crazy.
And that's critical because look at the Warriors. You just don't see it. And so
then,
would I love to see them win it all again? Yes, but I don't see it.
Then the question becomes, is this the greatest dynasty in American sports history? We're talking 6 championships here.
I mean, the Yankees exist in the 1950s and 60s. And
I know, but I mean, there's a legit title. I mean, we are talking
Tiger Woods exists.
We're talking 4 NBA championships. We're talking 6 conference titles. There's a legitimate argument to be made.
Oh, yeah, there's absolutely a legitimate argument.
Because Tiger Woods is an individual accomplishment. But
okay.
But 4 championships in the NBA, 6 conference titles, that is in a league. Here's the thing, Mia. They did it in an era where superstars drive everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they dominated in that. I'm not going to sit here and say they're the greatest, but I really do think there is a conversation to be said that they dominated the toughest conference in NBA history for a long period of time. 6 conference titles, like I said. I think they have to be in that conversation. I really believe that.
I think a big part of it is that what will we see over the next few years? If we see, let's say this year, Nikola Jokic, former MVP, rises to the top and he wins. Next year, maybe the 76ers do somehow finally pull it off and Embiid wins it all. And then the following year, Devin Booker finally gets his flower. If we see that parity like we see in the NFL over the next few years, then yes, we will look back and we will say what the Warriors did is incredible. Because the other argument I would make is Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. I think that there is something to be said about their competition in the AFC and particularly in the AFC East. Sorry to the Jets fans out there. A little bit of a cakewalk. The Buffalo Bills weren't what they were. Miami Dolphins were 8-8 perennially in the mid 2000s when Tom Brady was playing at Foxborough. But that would be the other one that I would compare it to. But no, I coming out of the Western Conference, yes, there is some merit to that for certain.
Just saying. Let's keep playing here in the Western Conference, Mia.
This one upsets me so much, John. Ja Morant, the cornerstone of the Memphis Grizzlies, has been suspended from all team activities again after a video.
By the way, it's the offseason. There's no team activities going on.
Yeah, I know, but still. After a video showing the star guard holding a gun began circulating on social media again. On Saturday, during an Instagram live session, his friend, Devontae Pack, who, by the way, has been banned from all Memphis Grizzly games, posted this live video on his own account in which Ja flashed a handgun while driving and singing along to a rap song. The video has since been deleted. Morant's already had to leave the Grizzlies this past season to enter a counseling program after a similar video of him holding a gun while intoxicated at a Denver club when the Grizzlies were in town to play a game surfaced on the internet. John, is Ja going to slowly work himself out of a superstar deal, both financially and in reality of being on a NBA hardwood?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I certainly think he already has, quite frankly, where he is an elite talent as far as a player goes. He changes the game when he's on the court. He's the guy that you want with the ball when it matters. But even in a culture where winning matters most, which I think a lot of pro sports that is the case, regardless of the circumstances, I think this incident happening so quickly after the other one. There were people who legitimately thought that people were just like retweeting articles from March when it happened. No, we're talking 2 months later. This is very dangerous behavior, but it's sad behavior because it is going to cost someone who could be a face of the league an opportunity to be just that. I do think he has put himself in a situation where no team is going to trust him with a mega contract and that he might have to be on a prove yourself superstar contract in order to actually go out and make money. And maybe I'm being misguided in that, but I think that for as hypocritical as some franchises may be, there's nothing that teams love more than making an example out of somebody. And I could totally see that being the case here.
So what do you think the ultimate suspension will be? He was suspended 8 games previously.
I think he could miss the first 15, 20 games of next season, potentially, if they find this to be everything that it looks like it's going to be. Or he'll be suspended for all off-season activities or something of that nature. But I imagine he's going to miss game time, a significant game time.
Because my question would be, at what moment will it finally settle in? If he misses 15 games, is it really going to hit him then?
I don't know. I don't know Ja Morant.
Right. We talked about this on my program today, and we had a lot of people texting in from a lot of different socioeconomic backgrounds and suggesting that in Memphis and the culture that exists in the city of Memphis, that this is somehow cool and he's earning respect this way. And listen, I'm not going to get into that can of worms. But all I know is I look at a LeBron James who grew up in a very difficult situation in Akron. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, a single mother, lived in housing projects. And somehow, some way, not only made it out and has become the greatest, if not one of the greatest players of our time, but also brought a lot of his circle with him from Akron. I mean, Maverick Carter, who runs all of LeBron's entities, Rich Paul, who became his agent and now represents hundreds of mega stars across multiple sports. And so LeBron's wife, Savannah, was his girlfriend in high school. And look at them. And so maybe LeBron's the exception and the Jaws are much more what the risk and the temptation of money and whatever. Like,
I mean, Ja's not the first person to deal with something.
No, and so that's why maybe LeBron's the exception. And so are we judging Ja unfairly? I don't think we are, because I think what he did is wrong, but he's 23. Most 23-year-olds are like Ja Morant. They're not like LeBron James.
Yeah, I mean,
at the end of the day, he needs to, I agree with you, he needs to be made an example of, because he needs to understand he's in an adult world. But I do think that we need to understand that LeBron is the rarity.
Yeah, but I also do think it's a little bit of a generalization to say that most 23-year-olds are like Ja Morant making mistakes like that. I don't think every 23-year-old is making a mistake as significant as that, because it is a significant mistake. It's not something to be played around with. Someone could have gotten hurt himself, someone else. It's a very serious thing that the Grizzlies have to investigate furthermore and determine here, what is his circle like? And yet the socioeconomic thing, that is a huge part of all of this. And that's why you got to be careful where you take your different approach on addressing this subject, because you don't know the shoes that somebody has walked in. It's a very difficult thing to wrap your head around. But as far as the question is concerned, where has this guy potentially played himself out of a lot of money? I don't think that is totally set in stone that is the case, but I do think in the short term, there's going to be significant hesitance to give him a max contract.
Right, because, I mean, if you're the Grizzlies, though, you have to be looking around saying, we've kind of hedged most of our future on this kid. And here we are. So, I mean, here they like, here's
they're good. They're really good.
Right. But now, what if you have to subtract
blame Dylan Brooks for this first?
What if you have to subtract Ja? Are they still really good?
I mean, I don't think they're in a position right now where they're going to subtract Ja. I think he still has his starting spot and there's no concern there at this moment in time. But if he was trying to get that early extension or anything like that, I mean, that's not happening right now.
It's I mean, if he was in the NFL, his guarantees would have been voided already if he played in the NFL.
Now, thankfully, NBA contracts guarantee a whole hell of a lot more money than NFL contracts do to players. But it does also beg the question of when and where will the NBA Players Association step in a situation like this? Because is he then at some point violating certain codes of conduct that could jeopardize other players in the league based on what a suspension might look like or how a contract situation is affected? I think those are elements at play here in a situation like this. And we would love to hear your thoughts on this. Leave us a super chat over there on YouTube or go to kynchat.com. We will read your comments on air. Please let us know your thoughts on all this. It's a sad situation all the way around. It really is. I don't like making light of it. But I can firmly say that I think he has played himself in the short term out of a mega contract.
But again, I think that it's a sad situation to all of us. It hasn't registered with Ja, just how sad it is.
And maybe that's where the Grizzlies would benefit having a long tenured Andre Iguodala style veteran on their team that they don't really have.
I mean, Dylan Brooks wasn't the veteran presence that was needed?
Not quite. Not quite. Let's keep moving on here. We talked about some parity in the NBA. Let's talk some parity in the NHL. This has been one hell of a Stanley Cup playoff, as it always is. Stanley Cup playoffs always deliver. And parity is always the theme. The Vegas Golden Knights dropped Connor McDavid, the Edmonton Oilers last night, to return to the Western Conference Finals for the third time in just 6 seasons of play. The Seattle Kraken, they may make the finals tonight if they beat the Stars in their second season of play. The Florida Panthers, Carolina Hurricanes, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals. This is amazing if you're a fan of parity. So are we going to marvel in the parity? Or let's bring up the talking point, Mia. Is it bad for the league?
I mean, maybe it's bad for the ratings, but I mean, when the Vegas Golden Knights went to the Stanley Cup in their second year of existence, I was on that bandwagon. That may have been some of the most hockey I've watched in the last decade. Um, that's where I think the Kraken, it's a cool storyline as well. And yes, while we have debated on this program, the Boston Bruins, a legendary regular season, only to fall apart in the postseason. The Edmonton Oilers, what is Connor McDavid's legacy? Because he can never make a Western Conference final. And so, yeah, I mean, for the casual fan, it's great. I'm not so sure for the diehards and for the TV ratings if it's the best thing.
Carolina and Florida.
Hockey towns.
Hey, Miami's eating good right now. They got the heat. You know, Sunrise isn't quite Miami, but it's pretty close.
It's there.
If Miami had a hockey team, it is the Florida Panthers. That's just crazy when you think about how much of a hockey state Florida truly has become in the last 5+ years between the Lightning and the Panthers. And the Panthers getting to this point, first time since 1996. It's amazing. The Carolina Hurricanes are nasty. I mean, they put a beating on the New Jersey Devils, and those fans are vicious there. That's not a place that I would want to play. Environment-wise, especially if Seattle makes it, these games will be awesome to watch. And I think that is great for the promotion of the league in terms of anyone could win it at any time. And the league should lean into that. Anyone can win at any time. I think that's great. From a TV perspective,
Vegas, Seattle, Florida, and Carolina.
Yeah, it's not great. But you know what? Here's the bottom line, Mia. If you want to watch these games, you're going to watch these games. It does not matter to me what the NHL's ratings are. It has no effect on me as a consumer. If I worked for the NHL, maybe that's a different feeling I've got. But I don't. So it has no effect on me how these games actually draw. I'm rooting for good games. I'm rooting for entertaining hockey at the end of the day. And the environments will be great. These Seattle games are awesome. Climate Pledge Arena, it's fantastic over there, these games. And I hope Seattle does do it. I'm rooting for Seattle to do this.
Plus, let me ask you this. Even if this was to be a star-driven league, who would you want to see in the Stanley Cup final? Like, who would you say? Like how people keep saying, like, I want to see LeBron in the final. Like, do we have that notion in hockey?
I mean, you do want to see the Connor McDavids. You do want to see the Austin Matthews. You do want to see those types. I think the league would love to have Jack Eichel in the Stanley Cup finals. But at the end of the day, hockey, as we've talked about on this podcast, is like the ultimate team sport. And that's what you're hedging your bets on, that these fans care so passionately about the team rather than just the superstars, that it's going to propel some people to have vested interest regardless of whether one of their teams is actually in the Stanley Cup finals. I'm about this. I think there's a bigger question at play here where if Seattle makes it to the Western Conference finals here, that's 2 expansion drafts that like really aided these teams, because for Vegas to do what they did and now Seattle to be doing what they did, will some teams and owners petition to change the rules of an expansion draft?
Or if you're Major League Baseball, do you look at that and you say, all right, we could have a team in Raleigh and a team in Nashville. We could have an expansion draft and we'll be able to make those teams instantly competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's certainly something that's on the table for a league like Major League Baseball. I didn't even put the Orlando Dreamers in this rundown, but you'll be hearing about them in a little bit on this show because I've got some things to say on that. I got some things to say on that, but they'll keep their eyes on expansion, of course, especially with Vegas and what's going on there, and as you said, Carolina too. It is interesting, but I think the parity is good at the end of the day. And we'll continue our discussion on the Stanley Cup playoffs next week here on Out of Bounds when we have a little more clarity on the parity. Let's keep moving, Mia.
Matty Ice may have been let go by the Colts, but he has not been let go by CBS. He agreed to a deal to call games and do studio work this morning. When the 37-year-old announced the news on Twitter, he said this isn't a retirement announcement. But if his playing days are done, John, is Matt Ryan, as of this juncture, a Hall of Famer?
Before I answer that, I know that Matt Ryan is one of those guys that you like to marvel over. So with his
No, I only like to marvel that he has been touched by Jim Irsay. That's really it.
well, look at that face right there. Look at that. That's a face.
I feel so bad because that 1 year in Indy, if anything, that tarnished what could have been a Hall of Fame legacy.
That's the question here. So we're talking a guy who MVP. He was a rookie of the year, a first teamer, I think a 4-time Pro Bowler. He's been to the Super Bowl, didn't win the Super Bowl, should have won the Super Bowl. If he had won the Super Bowl, maybe we'd be having a different discussion
because
here.
Flags fly forever.
But I think that Matt Ryan, despite all of his accomplishments, and this we are talking about one of the premier big arm quarterbacks in an era of big arm quarterbacks, I think he falls just short. I think he is the hall of very, very good who had sustained excellence, and he was excellent for a substantial period of time. But did you ever, even just outside of the MVP year, did you ever look at Matt Ryan and say that is hands down the best quarterback in the league?
Never.
There you go.
No. And that's where another part of this, and firsthand seeing this with Tony Baselli last summer and like the 5 years previous in which he was a finalist, it's hard to get into the NFL Hall of Fame. And that's no knock on the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, or Major League Baseball is probably the most difficult. It's hard.
Harold Baines got in, so
okay. Well, listen, so did Pudge Rodriguez, and he cheated.
Pudge is a Hall of Famer. Let's not even go there.
Yeah. But, so the point is that it's hard to get into the NFL's into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Very hard. Unless you put up Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, unanimous, like numbers. Yeah, if you're a fringe guy, you're going to have to sweat it out for a couple of years. Could I see Matt Ryan eventually down the line in an off year on the Veterans Committee get in? Absolutely. But during a time in which he was playing against guys that are undoubtedly Hall of Famers, if not already in, like Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, I think you could make a case that Eli Manning may be more of a Hall of Famer than Matt Ryan was.
I mean,
which is crazy to think.
I don't think it's that crazy in terms of accolades. Eli is definitely a more accomplished player, just off winning alone. But individually, Matt Ryan had, again, we're talking about a guy who was a legitimate big arm quarterback in an era of big arm quarterbacks. But I think there's like tiers, right? When you talk about Hall of Famers, there's the eye test where you know them when you see them. And then there's the guys that you're like, let me take a little bit of a deep dive. Yeah, they're probably in. He's in that tier of, I had a lot of good seasons. I had a pretty substantial drop off in the back end of my career, and I never won the big one. And I think that alone is just, that's enough to say that this guy is not among the elite ever. And again, as I said to you before, it's one of those situations where, did you ever look at him and say that guy was the best quarterback in the league? Because I think even in his MVP year, 2016, I don't think you could even confidently say that.
No, absolutely not. And I think even when you make his case to be a Hall of Famer, there's a lot more buts than there are. Yeah, but he did this. It's, he won an MVP. He went to a Super Bowl, but the last 5-6 years weren't what you would have hoped they would have been. And the first 4 or 5 years, not so much either.
Around too long really hurts a player in their Hall of Fame resume?
We're about to find out with Aaron Rodgers.
What? Are you insinuating that Aaron Rodgers?
No. Aaron Rodgers is a first ballot Hall of Famer, just like Brett Favre before him. But do you view Brett Favre's career differently, knowing he hung around a little too long and tried to latch on with both the Jets and the Vikings?
Maybe a little differently, but not to the point where I'm like, this guy's not a Hall of Famer. I'm saying with a guy like Matt Ryan, if he had Barry Sanders and he had walked away in his peak, and like Calvin Johnson did, do we maybe look at Matt Ryan's career more on the micro scale and say, man, for a sustained period in his career, which would have been much shorter, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Does that change the way that you look at a player if they stick around and then lose a whole lot?
I mean, some argue that with Baselli because he went to 5 Pro Bowls and was a 3-time All-Pro, but his career was only 8 years long. Same with Terrell Davis. So maybe. I mean, unfortunately, when it comes to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, as of right now, it's a lot of old men voting. And so I cannot for the life of me, as much as I've tried over the last 5 years, I cannot get into the brain of these 70-year-old men. And so maybe to them, they think of the Matt Ryan of 2016, but I will forever think of the Matt Ryan who was clinging on in a cap strap situation in Atlanta, and then later trying to be the latest retread to attempt to come back in Indianapolis.
Well, it gets us to our final topic before the Beast of the Week, Mia.
Here we are.
You see that man there standing up with his arms in the air?
Yeah.
It's a very lucky man. We don't know his name. He's an unidentified fan of
He lives in California, though.
Well, he's an unidentified fan of the Oakland A's, and I think there's maybe 1,000 or 2,000 of those in existence these days.
We probably could survey them all and find out his name.
Yeah, we could probably figure it out.
Us, the two of us together.
The A's, we know they haven't had a whole lot to celebrate this year. But this lucky fan gave us a nice little distraction from their product on the field. The team lost 11-3 yesterday to the Texas Rangers. But this fan in left center field caught not one, but 2 home run balls in this game, and he did so in back-to-back innings and without a glove, Mia. What impresses you most about this feat?
I would say how hard the ball was hit, but it is an Oakland A player hitting said ball. So, I mean, that's basically...
There was one A's homer and there was one Rangers homer, but... And keep in mind, you got to hit the ball a long way to hit a home run there at the Ratchet Coliseum, that I'll refer to it as there in Oakland. That's barely a stadium. I think what's most impressive about this, think about Zach Hampel. For those of you who aren't familiar with Zach Hampel, he identifies himself as a professional home run catcher. He's not super well liked in the ranks of Major League Baseball, but you can YouTube him and you'll see. And he's caught thousands and thousands and thousands of balls in his life. But not even he could have the formula to do something like this because it's so circumstantial. What are the odds that a home run, think of all the places that a home run can be hit. What are the odds that a home run is hit in the same exact section to the same exact row an inning apart? It is unfathomable. It has likely...
especially knowing how few people are there in the stadium.
Well, but
what are the odds it goes to that section?
Well, right. So there's so few people, and there's actually, I'm going to pop the picture up again. You can see there's for whatever reason, there's just fans in this one little section. He had to fight those people off for this ball. And this man...
They were trying to give the people what they wanted, John, so they were playing target practice.
I think this is truly wild. Think about how many baseball games you've gone to in your life. Have you ever caught a ball, a foul ball, a fair ball? Have you ever?
No, I pretended to, but really Tom Flash Gordon handed me one, and I had him sign it.
That's not the same.
I know, but I pretended I did.
I caught a batting practice foul ball one time, okay? I've been to hundreds of baseball games in my life. I've never come close to catching a home run. This man caught 2 in consecutive innings. I don't know, Mia. That's this is what dreams are made of. In the stadium that Moneyball was born.
But there also was another...
How could you not be romantic?
There was another baseball that got caught by a hockey player at Fenway, though.
Yeah, he had just gotten to his seat. And then...
and he barehanded it.
And then the moment that he got down to his seat, he ended up barehanding the catch, which that's pretty impressive at the end of the day.
What are the odds, Susan? You can't predict baseball.
No, you can't predict baseball, Susan. But I love this story. I think it's great. Kudos to him. I hope he gave one of them to a kid.
Yeah, one of the other 1,900 fans there.
Yeah, that would have been nice. Mia, it's time for the Beast of the Week. Who did the most beastly thing in sports this week for you?
I'm ready for this one. So it didn't happen this week, but I met him this week. Jaguars 7th round draft pick, Derek Parrish out of Houston. edge rusher through college, but he's undersized. So he is slated to be a fullback in the National Football League, John. This guy screams future strength and conditioning coach. And when I tell you this story, yeah, you're going to agree with me full-heartedly, because he won back in Houston last summer their offensive versus defensive line steak eating contest.
I like that.
He ate 112 ounces of steak, the equivalent of 7 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
He then, on his drive home from the facility, decided he wanted some Krispy Kreme to wash it down. When I spoke with him Friday, he also revealed that he has won not one, but 2 hot dog contests in his hometown of Houston, in his local neighborhood grocery stores.
We're talking about a legit competitive eater here.
Yes. I said to him, I was like, Joey Chestnut, look out. And he goes, oh, no, he eats like 60. He's like, I just had like 12 hot dogs in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's a lot. I did a hot dog eating contest on air one time. I won. I beat your boy Andrew Badillo, and it was disgusting, and I could never do it again. I ate a 2-pound taco on air once too in 13 minutes. That was. I
did a Taco Bell challenge in the fall, and that's probably why I now have to be on a diet for wedding season this summer.
That's fair.
Who's your beast of the week, John?
That's good. I like that. I'll give you. I'll let you bend the rules for that one. My beast of the week, Pat Williams and the Orlando Dreamers ownership group. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, allow me to indulge.
You have the floor.
So back in 2019, Pat Williams, for those who don't know who Pat Williams is, he's the man that brought the Orlando Magic to existence. And he was the one who got them in the lottery. He was their good luck charm for back-to-back #1 overall picks, where they had Shaq and Penny Hardaway. Great. This guy's a legend in that area. He's also a huge baseball fan. And before he dies, he wants it to be his lifelong mission accomplished statement to be able to say he brought not just the Magic there, but also a professional baseball team. And not just a professional baseball team, a Major League Baseball team to Orlando. Okay, that's nice and all, right? They revealed their name back in 2019 to be the Orlando Dreamers. There was a lot left to be desired. And basically it was like, we're going to sign up a website where you can sign up for season tickets to prove that we can bring a Major League Baseball expansion team here. Problem with this is Major League Baseball is trying to expand. Major League Baseball already has 2 teams in Florida, and they are 2 of the lowest drawing teams in all the league. So the market for a 3rd team is not super great. The Orlando Dreamers ownership group unveils, after 3 years of work this past week, this stadium concept design.
Rendering season.
Rendering season. For a stadium that would be based off I-Drive near Aquatica and SeaWorld. And I-4 over there. It would have a whole entertainment complex attached to it. And they are hell-bent on being an expansion team, though they said they'd be open to the Rays moving. I call them the Beast of the Week because this is so ambitious. And I give them credit for dreaming big. It looks beautiful. But they want to fund this $1.7 billion stadium project with publicly funded taxpayer dollars. That ain't going to happen. Number 2, have you ever been to Orlando, Florida? If you haven't been to Orlando, Florida, let me tell you something.
I-4 is the 3rd ring of hell.
Yes. And putting a stadium off of I-4 and International Drive, which is right near Universal as well, who, by the way, is building another theme park, Epic Universe, it would be a disaster of hellacious proportions. This is dead in the water. It's not going to happen. The only way this would happen would be if the Rays ended up moving to Orlando. That's the only way. There's no way Major League Baseball will grant Florida another Major League Baseball team, an expansion team. There are so many other cities that have far more logistical fluidity than the city of Orlando has. Nashville, Raleigh, Charlotte. There are other places, Montreal. Orlando doesn't even crack the top 5 for me.
My thing is just that.
Dream big, right?
Hey, Mickey Mouse said to dream, and he does live in Orlando. Right. So my thing is that in Jacksonville, they are potentially looking for taxpayers to pay $600 million for a renovated stadium for a team that went to two playoff games last year. So at the very least, and they have a coach and they have a quarterback, And you would think the owner is committed because they've built so much around the stadium.
That's because the money is going towards AEW. That's
right.
why.
I know. I said that to somebody. I'm like, look, the other option is Shad and Tony build the stadium on their own and they own it. And then guess what? When you want to play Florida, Georgia, Tony's going to say, no, we have AEW Dynamite that weekend. We cannot have Florida, Georgia. So, but no, to that point, I mean, I understand Jacksonville is about a third of the size of Orlando, but $600 million for, a franchise that has already existed in your city versus how much was that for the Dreamers?
$1.7 billion for the whole complex.
For a team that we don't even know exactly what's going to shake out.
Well, and then here's the other thing. Who's the owner? There's no ownership.
What's Pat Williams then?
It would be part of the group to attract an ownership group. It's the group that it is the tangible equivalent of you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. That is the tangible equivalent of that. The Orlando Dreamers, presented by blank, presented by Pat Williams.
We need to end the show on that.
And that's how we end the show, my friends. This has been Out of Bounds. We hope you join us next week right here. And we will see you next time on Know Your News.